was an honest film from the beginning, from Sholem Aleichem right on through. It had always been an honest observation of the human condition, the good and the bad. The material was from the Yiddish writer Sholem Aleichem. Norman felt that he wanted to do it very realistically. There was the novel, there was the play, and that had a spirit of not fantasy, but not terribly realistic visually. And Norman wanted to do it that way. So the first thing we had to do was to find locations that would be suitable. Now, this sounds like a normal thing, but it wasn't, because, for one thing, most of Europe had been ravaged by the war, and Hitler and his group had burned all the synagogues, the old wooden ones, so there were very few of the shtetls left, as was known in the time of Tevye and his family. So it behooved us to find an area that looked like the Ukraine. We finally found a villages south of Zagreb in Yugoslavia, which seemed to be ideal. The general feeling was an agricultural society, which was the Ukraine, and Tevye was a milkman anyway. We were telling the story of a family that had a cultural way of life that was very important, because most ethnic groups have this, whether they're Jewish or Christian or whatever. They are able to rely on the culture.
Because of our traditions, we've kept our balance for many, many years.
After we had selected this area south of Zagreb, we came back to Hollywood with all these hundreds of photographs of where we wanted to work. And by this time, we had established the style. And that's where I was fortunate in having two of the best film illustrators that ever happened in Hollywood, was Harold Michelson and Mentor Hubner, because they thought in terms of film. They could draw like crazy, but that wasn't it. They got the soul of the film into it, and that helped. Then I went armed with all this material, hundreds of sketches, most of the actual drawings for the shtetl, for the house. These were all working drawings. Everything had to be ready, because when we moved to London, that was the rehearsal period. Well, the rehearsal had to take place in mock-ups of the sets that we were going to build in Yugoslavia. Like the barn had to accommodate if I were a rich man. And the house had to be worked out so that you had the whole family for Friday night supper. And everything relied upon the culture and upon the music, because we were doing a musical.
If I were a rich man, yabba-dibba-dibba-dibba-dibba-dibba-dibba-dum, all day long I biddy-biddy-bum. If I were a wealthy man, I wouldn't have to work hard. Yabba-dibba-dibba-dibba-dibba-dibba-dibba-dum.
So it was evolving from Hollywood to London, rehearsal in these mock-up sets. And now we moved down to Yugoslavia, where we were building sets, and we had to stake out where we were going to put the various places. We had a shtetl well, where everybody collected. There was the synagogue, which was on the hill. We knew certain things. Now we staked this all out, and then I had all these drawings. And now we started to construct with material, which was not a problem in Yugoslavia because we could get it, and we tried to use old material. They used a lot of oak It was amazing. Many of the buildings were built of solid oak, even though they were just farm buildings. And then they set up a sawmill. They would take logs, cut their own lumber. Here in Hollywood, you go to a lumber yard, but they didn't. They got logs, they got old timbers, and they sawed up on this big saw that they had, run by a gas engine. The synagogue was built from wood gotten from old barns, and we used old timbers to give that sense of age. We did all sorts of things, and we found that the Yugoslav working persons who did the actual work of masonry and carpentry were sort of peasant workers, and they were great. They would sing a lot, they would dance a lot, and they worked their tails off. It was marvelous. When they would finish a building, for instance in the shtetl, when they built the synagogue, they would put a tree on top, a little cut tree. And they did that with every building that they completed. I thought, that's a sign of life. You have said, this building will be a building of life. It's not just a bunch of sticks. It's where people are going to live, and they're going to work, and they're going to play, and they're going to love, and they're going to do all of these things that are human. And that's all we were really trying to do in the whole film, all of us, from my job, cinematographers, certainly the director and the actors, were thinking in very human terms.
Your daughter has a quick and witty tongue.
The wit she gets from me, as the good book says.
The good book can wait. Get washed.
The tongue she gets from her mother.
We began to know this family, and everybody tried to be a part of it. So the whole filmmaking process became an integral part of the problem of Anatevka.
What do we leave? Nothing much, only Anatevka.
One of the interesting things is our location trip, exploring Anatevka and these little towns near Zagreb, the snow was terrific. Drifts up to 6 and 8 feet. And everything was snow. We could hardly get any place. But when we shot, there was no snow at all. So now the problem was, what do we do to make it look like winter snow? Well, we imported tons of marble dust from Serbia in the mountains. And we sprinkled this marble dust all around. And what we found, though, was that this thin, wind-blown snow, which was marble dust, gave even a colder sense than if it had been snow. So it turned out to be rather fortuitous that we were able to continue like that with the marble dust. This has happened so often in my work in films, is that you depend on the weather and it's never dependable.
To life, L'chaim.
Fiddler was probably the most important film experience that I had from a personal standpoint. Every film is a learning process. And I'd always known that the designer had to work with everybody, but in this one, it was particularly close in that you had to work with a choreographer, because the choreographer had to work with space, and of course costume design. Every aspect of filmmaking was, while not new to me, it was to the greatest degree of not so much difficulty, but honesty. You had to be honest with this film.